It's crazy to think that on the Playstore there are more automatic MMORPGs than non-automatic ones. And what's even crazier is that these automatic games are much more popular than the ones without autoplay. In this video, I'm going to show you 25 MMORPGs completely without automatic systems available on their Playstore, so stay tuned, leave a like, and let's get started. If you're looking for an MMORPG with a more classic style focused on player battles, character progression, and clan wars, let's talk about Rise Online. Well, the game takes place in the world of Arvad, a fantasy universe where you create your own character and choose between different classes to start your adventure. It's impossible not to notice the similarities with World of Warcraft, since the game also features a never-ending war between different races like orcs and humans. The gameplay is based on exploration, quests, monster hunting, and of course a lot of character progression. It is a game that tries to bring back the feeling of older MMORPGs while also adding many features from modern games. One of the biggest focuses of Rise Online is its PvP system, where players can fight against each other in battles, arenas, and clan wars. This is a game that has been around for quite a long time, which is honestly funny because I have never met anyone who actually played it. Let's talk about SAO Integral Factor. The story takes place during the famous SAO incident, where thousands of players became trapped inside the game and need to conquer the floors of INTRODUCION in order to escape. Technically, it is a more traditional MMORPG with different classes to choose from, character progression, and the cool part is being able to meet the famous characters from the series. The gameplay works as an action RPG, and the most unique thing about this game is the tower system, which can give you many advantages if you manage to reach the very end. Definitely the most different game on our list, let's talk about an MMORPG called SKILLMASTER. I really like the graphics of this game and how simple it is. Right at the beginning, you choose between the three main classes and then you are thrown into a world full of enemies to defeat. The game doesn't have much complexity when it comes to character progression or figuring out the perfect map for your level. You can go to almost any area and fight all kinds of monsters you find. One interesting part is the gameplay, which works somewhat like a roguelike. There are currently many people playing and it's definitely worth checking out. If you're looking for a mobile MMORPG with a more traditional experience, Starfell Online is a great game, and honestly that's both a good thing and a bad thing. For example, you always know exactly what you need to do in this game, from choosing your class to knowing which type of monster is better for your character. At the same time, this can become tiring and not very innovative. The truth is, I recommend this game more for people who enjoy older MMORPGs and like this classic style. This is another game that was released this month, and of course it still needs more players. It's very lightweight and works on almost any type of phone, so it's definitely worth trying. If you enjoy MMORPGs with a more colorful style, charismatic characters, and that classic game feeling, Seal Mobile is definitely a good choice. This game feels very similar to Ragnarok, especially because of its graphics and of course its open world. One interesting thing is that the game mixes classes with professions. You can become a warrior, a knight, or even something completely different like a cook. The gameplay combines traditional RPG elements with systems designed for mobile devices. I tried playing it and noticed there were many players around. After doing some research, I discovered that the game also has an NFT system. The MMORPG also features several social systems, allowing players to interact, create groups, participate in multiplayer activities, and even build relationships through the couple system. Another game on our list that is a little controversial to classify as an MMORPG, but let's talk about HELLGUARD. In this game, after creating your character, the main focus is entering dungeons with other players to level up and improve your character. Unlike other games, it doesn't have an open world. Instead, it has several cities where you can meet other players, trade items, and make friends. And basically, all the monsters in the game are inside the dungeons. The cool part is the combat system. It's basically an action RPG, much more fluid and better than what you can find in many MMORPGs. Another thing that makes the game stand out is its variety of classes. Many games on this list only have 3 or 4 classes, but this one has more than 15, and each one feels completely different from the others. If you miss those classic MMORPGs with pixel art graphics and a strong feeling of progression, KAETRAM Online is the game for you. In this game, you create your own character and start a journey through an open world full of areas to explore, quests to complete, monsters to defeat, and hidden secrets to discover. Unlike many games on our list where you simply start a mission and progress gradually, this game focuses much more on slower combat and a slower progression system, allowing you to enjoy the entire experience. Since the game uses pixel art and doesn't focus too much on graphics, it makes up for it in other ways, adding many different skills for you to choose from and creating a very complex experience. I would probably classify this game more as an online RPG, but the truth is that you can still find other players in it. Let's talk about Legends of ELUMIA. This is one of those MMORPGs that almost works like a dungeon crawler. For example, the game doesn't have an open world for you to explore, and basically all the monsters are inside dungeons where you need to enter either alone or with your friends. The game is very easy and intuitive. It's simple to learn the classes, and the dungeons are always divided by levels. The combat system is really interesting, and I think this is a game worth giving a chance. It is very unknown on the Playstore and doesn't have many players, but it is definitely worth checking out. This MMORPG is very different and has a really unique system. Let's talk about NAICA REBORN. One of the first things that stands out is the class system and also the races of your characters. Here, there are no humans. Basically, all the characters are humanoid animals. The races change a little as you progress through the game, but overall, it's still a pretty normal system. And what I noticed is that the game has a smaller number of maps, but all the monsters evolve as your character gets stronger as well. Honestly, I have never seen this in another MMORPG. The combat system is interesting, and the game is also extremely complex. It is available on Android and PC, and it looks like a really cool game. This game is not available on the Play Store, but it is definitely worth looking for because of how it works. Let's talk about POKEMMO. Actually, it's very easy to find this game. It has its own website where you can download the MMO, and basically someone took classic Pokemon games and transformed them into an MMORPG. The cool part is that players can interact with each other. The game has the same story mode that you would expect from a Pokemon game, but now there are many other players doing the same thing. The maps are filled with players, making the world feel much more alive. Another great thing is that it has full crossplay support. You can play on PC and also on Android, and if you are a Pokemon fan, you definitely need to know this game. I honestly love this MMORPG because it is very simple to play, but at the same time, it is extremely addictive. Let's talk about ETERSPIRE. This game reminds me a lot of Roblox games where you enter a map, there are already many players playing around, and you need to progress in your own way. One interesting thing is that the game limits you in certain aspects. For example, you can enter maps with a higher level requirement than your character. That's why I say the game is very easy and intuitive. You always know exactly what you need to do and where you need to go. However, at the same time, it can be very challenging, especially when you face stronger monsters. And of course, the most impressive part is that the game doesn't have an automatic system. This is another very old game that has been lost inside the Play Store, but it's definitely worth knowing. Let's talk about FLYFF Universe. Honestly, I'm much more of a Ragnarok fan, but I remember the release of this game a long time ago. After doing some research nowadays, I discovered that it is actually the same game, basically bringing a classic version of FLYFF hidden on the Play Store. One really interesting thing is that the game is extremely lightweight, taking up less than 100 megabytes, and on PC it can even run directly in the browser. But the most interesting part, without a doubt, is how much of an old school MMORPG it feels like. And basically, you grind, defeat monsters endlessly, visit crowded cities full of players, and it really feels like you're playing an MMORPG from the early 2000s. Definitely one of the most beautiful games on our list, and also one of the heaviest. Let's talk about Game of Thrones KINGSROAD. The game has been out for a while now, so it has probably received many updates, but you don't need to worry if you've never watched Game of Thrones. That's because the MMORPG only uses the world and setting, while the story follows completely fictional characters inside that universe. Speaking of the story, many times you will be helping characters survive in this crazy world, while also improving your own character and discovering different things along the way. One funny thing about this game is that you actually play alone most of the time, and it only becomes a more traditional MMORPG when you enter the cities. If you're looking for an MMORPG with a strong story and a fantasy world full of adventures, Guild Wars Reforged is a new version of one of the genre's great classics. When people talk about Guild Wars, they usually think about the PC version, but this one is a little different. At the beginning of your journey, you create your own character by choosing one of the many available professions, each with its own combat style. After doing some research, I discovered that this is actually the first version of Guild Wars, but remastered and released for Android, and not only that, it also came to PC. You will explore maps, complete quests, fight monsters, take part in boss battles, and discover a story divided into great campaigns. If you enjoy MMORPGs with a more relaxed style and focused on exploration, HEARTWOOD is a game that tries to bring a different experience to the genre. In the game, you start by creating your own character and exploring a large world full of areas to discover, resources to collect, and creatures to face them. The most interesting part is the survival system, where you need to gather items and craft new things as you progress through the game's RPG progression system. Can't really classify this game as a survival MMO, but it manages to do these elements really well. It is an MMORPG that doesn't try to reinvent too much. It is very simple in many aspects, but it does the simple things very well. This was one of the first MMORPGs released on the Playstore, and even after 12 years it is still active. Let's talk about Arcane Legends, another very simple game where you can't expect too much complexity because of when it was created. And the funny thing is, this game feels much more like a dungeon crawler than an actual MMORPG. The game had 5 different classes for you to choose from, and the only way to progress was by entering dungeons, either alone or with other players, collecting as many items as possible, and of course leveling up your character. It is very simple in that aspect, but one of the best parts is the huge variety of items that the game can give you. I also remember that the game had a pretty interesting PvP system, so it's definitely worth checking out. Well, this game is simply incredible. It has been active on the Play Store for more than 10 years, and there are still players enjoying it today. Let's talk about Celtic Heroes. Well, we are talking about an MMORPG that is over 10 years old, so yes, it is limited in some aspects. For example, it only has 4 classes for you to choose from, and of course the open world is not as big as some of the other games on our list. However, I highly recommend this one for anyone looking for a more old school experience. That's because the game never holds your hand. I would even say it has a more hardcore style where you really need to understand what you are doing. But the best part is that it has a loyal and passionate community that keeps the game alive. This is the type of game that ends up confusing a lot of people. Many think it is a survival game, but that's not really the case. Let's talk about Dragon and Home. After creating your character, you will enter a world with many other players around you. The interesting part is actually the beginning, where you collect wood, gather stone, and everything has that blocky style similar to Minecraft, which is why many people think it's a survival game. However, I can tell you that this is just the beginning. Later on, you choose your character's class, defeat bosses, and that's when it starts becoming more of an RPG. The coolest part is this mix that the game creates. As you progress, you need to collect items, make sure your character doesn't starve, and at the same time keep improving and leveling up. If you don't want to go after the Pokemon MMORPG outside of the Play Store, there is this one available there. Let's talk about Duel Revolution. This is one of those games that doesn't appear on the Play Store unless you search for its exact name. I'm not sure why that happens, but the game is basically the same idea, except it doesn't use the Pokemon name. Instead, it has its own monster catching system, which is really cool. After creating your character, you just need to choose your first monster and head into the city to battle and complete the game's missions. As I said, it works very similarly to Pokemon, but with different creatures. And the fact that they transformed this concept into an MMORPG is simply genius. One of the first MMORPGs with a more roguelike style that I know on the Play Store. Let's talk about Dungeon Cross Relic Hunter. One really interesting thing about this game is that it doesn't have classes, but instead it has different characters that you can choose from. Basically, they work like classes, but every player still feels very similar. After choosing your character, the main focus of the game is entering dungeons to level up and of course collecting new items. Besides that, the game has several cities where you can trade items and talk with other players. However, this is another MMORPG that doesn't have a huge open world for you to explore. But without a doubt, what really stands out is its combat system, which is heavily inspired by roguelike games. Definitely one of the most famous games on our list and also one of the oldest. Let's talk about Adventure Quest 3D. This is a game that is basically a parody of other MMORPGs, especially World of Warcraft. And of course, even though it doesn't have the best graphics, it really does look a lot like World of Warcraft, maybe being the game on our list that feels the most similar to it. This is one of those MMORPGs that doesn't really try to innovate. The classes are things you've probably already seen before, the world feels familiar, and many elements may remind you of other games. But it manages to make the simple things work so well that it becomes extremely addictive. And of course, the game also has a very loyal player base that plays every day and is always looking for more players to join. If there is one game on our list that deserves more players, this is definitely the one. Let's talk about Arrow Tales. I think it's fair to say that this is an indie game made by players for players. Of course, that changes many things inside the game. For example, there is no automatic system at all, and the game is much more focused on PvP. But for some reason, the game feels a little empty. I spent some time playing it, and it is an extremely complete MMORPG. I was honestly impressed by how much content it has. It's the type of game where it feels like nothing is missing, with that true old school MMORPG style. The game is fully crossplay and very easy to understand, so it is definitely worth checking out. The gameplay of this game is simply crazy, and you'll understand exactly why. Let's talk about ALCHEMIA's story. Looking from the outside, you might think this is just a more traditional MMORPG focused on anime style with an open world to explore and many things to do. But surprisingly, the game is actually a turn-based RPG. Of course, this completely changes the way you play. Unlike Pokemon, where this type of combat feels more natural, this game can be a little difficult to get used to at first, but everything is very well made, and even though the game currently needs more players, it is still an extremely complete MMORPG. And that's it for today's list. If you know another MMORPG without autoplay that deserves to be here, leave it in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later.